Well, I think we may now be live. Carol, good morning. How are
Good.
you?
I'm good. How are you, Bernard?
I'm doing well. I think I'm going to get there. Good morning, everybody. It's Bernard Nomberg with another weekly episode of NOMBERG Law Live. And I'd love to come to you guys every Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. And I have interesting folks talking about areas that are in their wheelhouse. And today is certainly no different. I've got my buddy from South Florida, Carol Williams, on the other side. How you doing, Carol? And how's the weather down in Florida?
I am great. Thank you for having me. And the weather today is perfect, but we are getting ready to get a tropical storm this weekend. So,
Oh,
you know,
wow. Well, I know it's
we
that time of the year.
it is. We're in the middle of hurricane season, so we've been lucky so far. So it's all good.
Well, I know, as you always will, be safe and be
Yeah.
mindful of the weather. Did you get your either run or some yoga in today yet?
I did some yoga. I'm gonna try to run later on this afternoon. We'll see.
Excellent, excellent. Well, before we get into today's topic and get into it, I want to say good morning to my buddy OJ in Tennessee, OJ Fleming. I've got Chelsea over there, and we've got the birthday boy, Mitch Jackson, has just joined us from California. Good morning, Mitch, and happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, Mitch.
Well, guys, today we've got Carol Williams with Williams Immigration. Carol are you transplanted newly to Florida or returning back to Florida from being in Atlanta?
Returning back. A few years ago, I lived in Florida for a few years and then left for a little bit. Wound my way to Atlanta, started my firm in Atlanta, and then a little over a year ago, came back to South Florida. So,
Excellent,
yeah,
excellent. Well,
it's a nice
Carol,
home.
they know you run, they know you do yoga. Now that you have an immigration practice in Florida, tell everybody a little bit more about you.
So I'm originally from Connecticut, and still, because of that, fall is still my favorite season, because if you've ever been to New England during fall, it's absolutely gorgeous. But I have been moving further and further south. I am now in South Florida again, where I plan to stay for good. The ocean was calling me back, so here I am. I'm 30 minutes from the ocean, and it's great. I love to go running, like you said, yoga. I've done a couple marathons, done an international marathon over in Turkey, so that was probably the highlight of my
Wow.
running career thus far. But yeah, just kind of hanging out and working and, fighting one visa at a time.
Very good. Well, you and I have known each other for a couple of years now through our
Yeah,
online lawyer groups, through Legal Minds, and I can't recall if you're in Max Law as well, but
of course,
we
of
we
course.
see each other at least weekly, if not multiple times a week online in our groups, and I have really enjoyed the interaction and our friendship in the last couple of years and really appreciate the type of work that you do because I know that it is not easy work.
Well, it's not easy, but you know what? It's all I've ever done for the last 20 years. So it is indeed where my legal passion lies. So thank you for that.
Well, let's talk about that. In today's climate, today's political atmosphere, and the way society has just, with social media, it's just all of society is so much in your face. And with our current political, presidential regime and the approach that has taken with immigration, with immigrants, with anyone really, it seems that immigration law has really been shoved to the forefront in a hurry in the last couple of years. And I know that it is something you're very passionate about. I see a lot of exchanges with you and several of our other buddies online who do the same type of work. Josh in California, of course, Jim in St. Louis, and I could go on and on. But what you guys do really is at the forefront and is in the news, if not daily, multiple times a day. So I want to just kind of dive into that. How did it become your passion, and how is it let's talk about your approach to practicing law as well.
Sure. So I kind of came to immigration randomly, quite honestly, I knew when I went to law school that I wanted to do some sort of criminal law. I didn't know if it would be prosecution or defense side. Um, and then I really hated my first criminal law class. And then I decided to give it a chance. And then I really hated my evidence class. And so I wound up taking an immigration class abroad in Mexico and fell in love with it. Just absolutely fell in love with it. It married everything that I loved to do in terms of travel and meeting new people, exploring new cultures. And I'd be lying if I didn't say exploring new foods. So it really, honest to goodness, married everything that I loved. And then I got back that fall of my third year of law school and figured out how to get myself into the immigration clinic. And honestly, the rest is history. It's just what I've been doing ever since I graduated. So I really kind of lucked up on it. But I believe that this is what I was meant to do. So there's never been a day where I've thought about it or said, well, maybe I should switch to something else. It's just what I was meant to do.
Well, that's so awesome. I know for law students, unless you have a family firm to go into, or you've been chosen by a law firm, all right, we want you to go to law school and here's what you're going to be doing. For the rest of most, probably 98% of kids and students in law school, they don't find that in the timing that like you did. And I just think that's so awesome that what you got exposed to, that just kind of sets your path. And it's clearly, your enthusiasm is there, because every time I hear you or interact or hear you speak, that is clearly something that you found your calling.
You know, I really did. And I will say what really solidified it for me was when I participated in the immigration clinic in my law school. And that professor was and is absolutely amazing. He is still at George Washington University, Professor Benitez. I'll give him a shout out because I honestly haven't made, I know, I love him. I haven't made a career move without him. And he really walked me through what it was to help people that are fighting to stay here in the U.S. and continues to be a sounding board to me to this day. So I really can't imagine my career without him. But he really solidified and really taught me how to practice, really taught me how to think from the client's perspective and how to really try to, as much as I could, put myself in their shoes. And I, organize my files to this day the way that he taught me in law school. So there's so many things that he gave to me in law school that I still have today that I use in my practice every day.
Isn't it great to have a mentor?
Oh, he's amazing. He's amazing.
I love hearing stories of regardless of the profession, but older people who've experienced through whatever it may be, being able to give back to younger students and younger lawyers. That's so very cool. I know you have a special bond with the professor. Well, let's talk about your approach. We're going to get into some specifics in a few minutes. For those of you just joining us, I'm speaking with my buddy Carol Williams from South Florida, Williams Immigration, and we're talking about the passion she brings to her practice and the approach in helping so many people who really, really just don't know where to turn and need her type services. So tell us a little bit about that approach.
So my approach is really one of partnering with my clients. A lot of my clients, whether they are individuals trying to bring their family members to the U.S., or if they are businesses trying to hire that right candidate for their organization, they're not quite sure what to do. And so I really look at our attorney-client relationship as a partnership. I love to teach. I think somewhere deep inside me, there's a teacher, because it's really important to me that my clients really understand the process. And I tell my clients all the time, don't just sign things because the lawyer sent you the documents. Read them. If you don't understand them, my job is to explain the entire process to you. And it's sometimes really hard for my clients to ask questions because we have this idea and notion in society that, attorneys are talking, everybody else should be quiet and really listen, and whatever they say goes. And a lot of times my clients have really good suggestions on where we should go, and based on the conversations that we have, really helps me figure out what their goal is, because my job is to help them reach their goal. A client can come to me with a set of facts in their personal situation, and I could have 5 things that I think they should do immediately. But if my client is only ready to focus on one of those 5 things, or focus on something that's not even on my list of 5, it does me no good, and it doesn't help me help my client if I try to steer them to focus on something that they're not ready to focus on. So I really look at it as a partnership, and it's my role really to help my clients get where they're trying to be, whether that bring over a sibling, bring over a spouse, bring over a fiance who's living outside the country, or whether it is to help a business hire that one individual that they think will really help their business grow. So it's really a partnership. Like, I really like to partner with my clients versus this just, I work for you, you work for me, you do as I say, here are documents, sign them. That's not how I work. And I tell all of my clients come to me, they're worried. And I tell every single one of them, don't worry until I tell you to worry. Let me do all the worrying for you. Let me do all the work on the back end. And you just hand your worry off to me. And when I say that, for some clients, I can literally see their shoulders just go down, because they finally met that person who is willing to walk with them in this journey, whether that journey is going all the way to citizenship, or whether that journey is bringing over a relative or a loved one, or hiring someone. It's everyone says, immigrants should just do it the right way. Well, the right way is very complicated, and sometimes that's very difficult to do by yourself. So when you have someone that walks beside you, I think the process becomes a lot less stressful. So my job is really to think ahead for my clients, but also to make it just less stressful for them, and to help them get a good night's sleep, along the way.
What a solid approach, and that's what we tell our clients. My job is to take away a little bit of your stress and give you answers to questions that you may not even know you have questions to. But right. Carol, we've got a comment and a question from OJ watching in Tennessee. He says communication has to be vital in your field, really any field, and I totally agree with that. And his question is, how do you handle language barriers, if any?
So the way I handle language barriers is sometimes we will need the use of a translator. But I am really big on face-to-face communication. So a lot of that is going to be video calls, so that they not only get the language, but they also get the body language. And sometimes that is super important to clients to really understand. Language, the actual spoken language is honestly kind of easy. We can always get a translator on the phone with us. A lot of times it's the body language and it is the unspoken language that is sometimes harder to decipher. So I have taken to doing video calls with my clients, and it also gives them that sense that they have access to me, and they can go out to their car real quick during lunch. Or quickly on their way to work in the morning, as opposed to swinging by a physical office. So that's really how my clients and I work the language issue.
It is. I want to welcome our buddy Morris up in Huntsville. Good morning, Morris, who's just tuned in. Carol, it is for people born in the United States who don't deal with lawyers or have never dealt with lawyers. Lawyers can be scary people. I can only imagine people who have moved to the United States, and there's the language barrier and there's the cultural barrier, how much even more scary lawyers can be. I love your approach. I love that you have access to me. I don't want to just talk to you on the phone. I want to see you. I want you to see me. that must, again, like you said, the shoulders must just drop a little bit, and you can just see a little bit of relief.
Hmm.
What you're telling them may not be all good news, but
Correct.
you're gonna hopefully get to where you can
Right.
hear good news. And guys, if you're just joining me, I've got Carol Williams Immigration in South Florida, and we are talking about language barriers, if any. We're talking about how Carol's approach to partnering with her clients really is the way that she helps to best represent them. And I love that. I think it's way too easy for a lawyer to say, I'm the lawyer, you're the client, you're going to do what I say, and here's how we're going to do it. But for the type of work that you do, I don't think that approach can work necessarily because that just, you got to make sure you're, like you said earlier, you got to figure out what the agenda, what the goals are of the client to figure out the path that you're going to take. That's so cool. Now, let's pivot for just a minute, Carol. Let's talk about, um, you and I talked last week about a couple of different subjects, and I think one of them was the increase in employer audits and raids that have been going on. And we're going to look at this not from the employee standpoint, but more from the employer standpoint. So why don't you
Yeah.
share, because I know you've been exposed to that lately. So let's talk about that.
Sure. So a lot of times the news goes after things that are sexy, right? Like they go after things that are totally fascinating and interesting. And what is more eye-catching when it comes to looking at something online or watching your news at night than ICE agents with guns on their hips, three letters on the back of their jacket, blazing into a building. That bad news sells. That's just where we are. But that has not only a lot of ramifications for the employees, it also has really significant ramifications for the employers, which we don't actually really hear about in the news a whole lot. There's a lot of work that leads up to an actual raid, and some of that work is looking at whether or not the government believes that there are a large number of undocumented individuals working at a specific work site or at one specific company with locations across the US. So we've seen raids that have targeted specific companies in the past several years. We've seen raids that have targeted one or two companies that are just larger with maybe only one or two locations. What tends to happen after a raid, which nobody ever really talks about in the news because honestly it's paperwork and that's not sexy, you don't really get really good photos for your news, is that the government comes in and reviews all of the I-9 documents. And they essentially say to an employer, we would like, let's say, the last 3 years of your I-9s, and we'd like them in 3 days. For a company that may have 1,000 employees, to pull all of the I-9s that you're supposed to have within 3 days is a tall order. And so the I-9 tells the Immigration Service, it also tells the employer the identity of the employee and also whether or not they're work authorized in the US. So everyone should be filling out this form. If you are a W-2 employee, you have filled out this form. If you're an employer and you hire W-2 employees, they should be filling out this form. Doesn't matter whether or not the employee is from outside of the US or whether they're from the US, whether they're a green card holder, whether they have temporary work authorization, everybody should be filling out this form. And so when I'm engaged and I'm going through the forms and I'm representing them in front of the government, my job is to figure out what problems, what pitfalls have you all been experiencing in completing your I-9s that you didn't know that you were experiencing? Because those are the pitfalls and those are the red flags where the government will say, but you should have known. You should have known this wasn't a valid document. Now, granted, there are some documents that I have seen over the years, and it honestly looks like a third grader put it together. And then I have a real frank conversation with the employer. But there are some fraudulent documents that are really, really good. They're really good fakes. The government's not trying to turn employers into fraud experts, but the government also doesn't want to see a pattern in practice of what they believe is knowingly hiring individuals that are not authorized to work in the US. And so while when I started practicing 20 years ago, it was a simple one-page form. It's now morphed into a two-page form, which is still essentially the same information. The government has increased the number of audits that they are now doing. And that increase has come specifically under our current White House administration.
It sounds like it really creates a chilling effect on employers because of the increased responsibilities they now have with making sure that they're hiring people that they should be hiring.
I think for some employers it certainly has a chilling effect. I don't think the I-9 and the process of hiring somebody, whether that person is a U.S. citizen or not, I don't think that process itself needs to be overly complicated and very difficult. I think systems and processes and procedures save all of us, whether or not we are talking about hiring, whether we're talking about just running a business. If we have good systems and procedures in place as business owners, whether you're a small business to a Fortune 500 business or a Fortune 10, right? Every business is successful in part because they have really good systems and procedures in place. And so the hiring process is just that, it's a process. So if I can get into a company and help them put the I-9 piece of their hiring process in place and really go in and train them and say, here are the things that you need to be looking out for, here are the things that you need to be doing, the I-9 shouldn't be a scary form. But when done incorrectly, either by accident or on purpose or just simply not done, that is when the government has a problem. And that's when the whole hiring process gets very, very scary because the government does not appreciate knowingly breaking the law, which, it just doesn't.
And these issues, the whole gamut of issues with immigration seems to be in the news all the time. But I can remember, you probably were in law school at the time. You remember when the Cuban child, the Gonzalez kid, was on, they had the very scary video of the raid.
Yes.
Maybe, I don't remember, maybe it was CNN, I can't remember, but that made such huge international news.
It did.
And I'm sure that it served its intended purpose, but back then, these issues, at least in my mind, were not nearly as often or as important of a topic on a day-to-day basis like they are now. And how is it that 20 years later, almost 20 years later, I still remember that video and the news surrounding that?
Right.
I don't remember if you recall that from law school or maybe you were just
I do.
To school.
Oh, I do. The images that came out of the Elian Gonzalez case were and still are incredibly memorable. Who can forget a child being ripped out of a house? No, I don't think anyone's going to forget that, especially here now that I'm back in South Florida. And I actually moved to South Florida shortly after that happened. But the images of that are incredible. Just as now, like you said, all these years later, we have incredible images of ICE agents and local law enforcement, because the ICE agents often, when they're doing a larger raid, will coordinate with local law enforcement. Those images of the raids, or I should say really sort of the tail end of the raids, where all you're seeing are workers who are being handcuffed and put into trucks and vans, with huge DHS logos on the side, are being taken away. Those are memorable images. And so I think where we are very different as a country and as a world from the Elian Gonzalez case to now is that we have social media. So those images whether good or bad, no matter how you may feel about what's happening politically or what you may feel about immigration, images are instant now. So something can happen in California and we will know about it 20 seconds later because of social media. So
Everyone's a publisher.
sure, absolutely.
Everyone's, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
And so,
go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was going to kind of pivot a little bit about how it's now becoming harder to sponsor loved ones, significant others, and let's talk about that because I know that that's a hot button issue right now for you.
So we, earlier this month in August, we just had a new law that came in, well, that was published. It will come into effect in October, so that's 60 days. And what it does is it expands the Immigration Services ability to deny immigration applications if someone has ever received or there is a likelihood that they will receive means-tested public benefits. So what that means is essentially if you have currently received or if you are currently receiving, if you have received in the past benefits that are based on your income level, the government can say, well, wait a minute, are you able to sponsor and financially provide for the individual that you want to bring to the US? And so applications as of October, we will start to see a lot more pushback from the Immigration Service. So that's from applications that are happening within the US. It's for green card applications. They've also expanded that to folks that are coming in on temporary visas to come, let's say, for vacation, to come for several years to work for an employer. So the standard is going to be a lot higher to show that the sponsor, whether that sponsor be a business or whether it be a family member, that they have the financial means to support this person should they need it. Now, immigration is a little wonky in that we've got many, many agencies that actually impact immigrants. The Department of State runs the consulates overseas. The Department of State has already started and has, slowly changed their policy where it pertains to an individual's ability to be sponsored and be taken care of financially once they get to the US. So in a sense, this is the Immigration Service, sort of getting in lockstep with Department of State. And so a lot of people will think, well, that's easy, that shouldn't be really difficult. But I actually wrote this out and I'm looking at it so I don't get it wrong. The regulation that the Immigration Service just published is 837 pages. So while I have boiled the summary down to a minute, maybe a minute and a half,
holy smokes,
the regulation itself is 837 pages. So not something that any of us immigration lawyers are taking lightly. And, it's something that we will be reading and rereading and rereading for quite some time so that we can get ahead of this for our clients come October.
Carol, I'm not sure that Elian Gonzalez's Exodus book, the famous book from the 50s, is shorter. It may be about the same length of those regulations. Holy smokes.
Yeah, we are not short on paper when it comes to immigration.
Is the effect that is it safe to say that you can predict that this is only going to slow down or enlarge the length of period of time in order to get approvals or to get decisions as well?
Absolutely. I think, there have been a lot of changes in immigration under our current White House administration. And so having worked within the immigration service for a couple of years, I have a unique perspective on that. So all of these changes, while they certainly affect private bar immigration attorneys, and while they certainly affect the nonprofits out there who are doing some amazing work with immigrants, it also impacts our clients, of course, but it also impacts all of the adjudicators within the immigration agency who adjudicate cases across the country on a daily basis. So when things come out from the White House, they go down to the agency headquarters in Washington, D.C. It then has to disseminate across the country. And if we're talking about Department of State, it now has to disseminate to all of the different consulates. So we have thousands of adjudicators in the US who now have to get the new policy, understand it, get trained on it, and then pivot in the way that they are now adjudicating applications. So changes coming out as fast as they are impact everyone involved with the process, inside the government as well as outside the government. So absolutely, as much time as it takes us on the outside to figure out what the new changes are, how we can then, pivot and tweak and turn to help our clients, is the same pivoting and tweaking and turning that is happening inside of the agency at all of the local offices and all of the larger service centers across the country. So everything will just naturally slow down. It doesn't matter what the policy is. We've just had a lot of new policies come out under this new administration. So yes, everything is slowing down, but it slows down for everyone.
Wow. Carol, I could talk to you for hours about this stuff. I sure appreciate you sharing your passion, your
Anytime.
expertise and knowledge about this. How can people, whether they're employers who have questions about I-9s and having proper documentation,
Sure.
or there are families who have these issues that are in your area, how can folks get in touch with you?
So I am on LinkedIn, of course, under my government name, because LinkedIn does not appreciate social media handles. So that is Carol Williams. They can feel free to call me at 678-322-7039, or I am on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram at USA Visa Guru.
Thank you, Carol. And if you'll put, or one of us needs to put all your contact information in the comments section.
Absolutely.
Guys, as we do each week, you heard from one of the best when it comes to immigration law. Carol, thank you again for your time and sharing all of that with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. As we do each week, guys, it's NOMBERG Law Live. We try to come to you with different topics, different people, and all of it interesting and so informative. And today was certainly a prime example. Thank you again for tuning in. We'll try to catch you again next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Pacific for NOMBERG Law Live. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Take care.